Welcome to Connections, the podcast from addiction professionals of North Carolina, where we explore the nuances of addiction and mental health through the lens of policy and practice.
We are your hosts, Morgan Coiner
and Sarah Howe,
and we're here to help you see how it all connects. Today we have with us David Roddenberry from the Governor's Institute. He is the Veteran and Military Programs Director. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, us too. Well, I wanted to just get started by having you just give us a little bit of an overview of the work that the Governor's Institute is doing to support veterans who are struggling with substance use and mental health disorders.
Yeah, so the Governor's Institute was established, I believe, under Governor Mike Easley to help combat the opioid epidemic. And, you know, a lot of those programs have taken the form of supports and training for addiction professionals, addiction medicine conferences, things like that. And I think has done some really phenomenal work all around the state and elsewhere, really bringing awareness to that. And so over the past few years, kind of with that close working relationship with DHHS and, other state government agencies, we've started to do more veterans focused work because so much of that really overlaps with what we're already doing. And so, if I were to kind of put GI's veteran activities into buckets or pillars, it would be collaborate, assist, and train is really how we kind of orient all of the supportive activities. I kind of think of our role as more of a capacity builder, or to steal a favorite military term, a force multiplier, right? That sounds so much tougher. And
it does.
Yes.
I'm gonna start leading with that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in a workforce shortage, the capacity building is overused. So we need a new term for it anyway.
Yeah. But anytime you can work force in. So, that's to say that we aren't necessarily out there providing direct services. We're not processing the benefits paperwork. We're not going out to the homeless encampments or providing therapy. There are folks in the state that do a fantastic job of all of that. And I think that, our most valuable contribution is that we can support them in that work, try to assist and support those frontline organizations with, some of our good training and outreach and communications, and just kind of being, that small, partially hidden, but, central cog in the machine.
Yeah, well, I want to kind of hone in on that training part for a minute. Y'all have started something really cool, the Veteran Support Specialist. And, a term that most folks listening to this podcast might be familiar with is peer support specialist. But you guys have taken that sort of not a step further, maybe like a step to the side, right? Like it's another way to provide that kind of support. So can you tell us a little bit about, what is a veteran support specialist? How do you become one? What's the purpose? Just kind of tell us a little bit about that program.
Yeah, so I'll start with an apology, because if I get a big goofy grin on my face, this is one of my babies, my absolute kind of favorite programs. About 10 years ago, I was working at Duke University, and we got a grant that was one of those blessed and cursed grants, and we got that from GlaxoSmithKline of North Carolina Foundation, which was extremely generous and, kind of propelled all this into being. But it was, we'll say, loosely worded. They said, do something with veteran peer support. And so, over a very lengthy kind of research and development process, what we did was end up adapting some of the tenets and the concepts behind certified peer support for those that serve veterans. And so not necessarily, someone who has had an addiction working with people with addictions, or someone who is a veteran working with veterans, but rather just, where can we employ some of these skills? And so that kind of looks like, again, three parts: awareness of conditions. So, to this day, there are a lot of misconceptions out there, even among those that serve veterans, about PTSD, about substance use. I don't think a year goes by where somebody doesn't come up to me after they've taken the class and say, hey, I took the substance abuse module and I had heard about the disease model, but I didn't understand it. A couple of years ago, I actually had somebody say, I haven't talked to my brother in 14 years. And after taking that, I understand what's going on. He took money out of my wife's purse at Thanksgiving. It's unfortunately a familiar story, where he says, I understand that. And I think now I'm in a place where I can reach out to that individual. But really debunking as much of that as possible. Then we have, speaking of tough sounding words, we used to call them soft skills. Now, because a lot of Marines, and I love my Marines, they are some of my best friends, and we call them tactical engagement skills.
Man,
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
Right down in the super tough dictionary. But we try to incorporate a lot of motivational interviewing, of person-first language, active and reflective listening. Unfortunately, also every year somebody comes up to me and says, hey, the active and reflective listening is impossible to teach to my husband. And so I'll admit that there are some limits to what we're able to teach at
Whole different
BSS.
course we can't get into. Right.
Yeah, I am wholly unqualified for that one.
Yeah.
There you go.
But the last piece is that throughout all of it, we really try to focus in on self-care. Mm-hmm. So many clinicians, so many providers, really, I'm sure you've run into this, that they give these little pieces of themselves every day, and they're not restoring that, and they're not, being the best self that they can be to help everyone, and, to be a part of the people in their lives. And so, just really getting past the guilt and shame that, say, a mother may have by taking 5 minutes, to actually use the restroom alone, something like that. It's really important. And then, we try to introduce kind of a values-based conceptualization. So, we start with kind of a values card sort, and we say, okay, what's really important to you? And, throughout this, as you're developing your own personalized self-care strategies, you're able to kind of refer back to those values and say, hey, does this really speak to something that's important to me? Or does this speak to something that someone would think should be important?
So, David, I'm curious, North Carolina has a strong military history. Our geography has several bases, and we are a military state. So as Governor's Institute started to look at this, what were some of the factors that you were seeing that led you to feeling this was critical? What are maybe some of the success stories that you can tell us a little bit about, too, what you've seen since this has evolved?
Sure. I'm glad that this is a 6-hour podcast. And
Sorry, all the time in the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but in terms of success stories, one really unique thing that we have in the state of North Carolina that almost no other state has is what we call the Governor's Working Group on Service Members, Veterans, and their Families. It started 15 or so years ago as a fairly project-based organization of folks in the veterans space that were kind of working along with SAMHSA and doing targeted research or program implementation and stuff like that. It evolved into the governor's focus a few years ago, and that became more of a networking and connection opportunity. And so here in the past few years, we've made some really positive strides by establishing 7 subcommittees. All those are kind of oriented around the social determinants of health. So we have education, employment, healthcare, housing, things like that. And so we're trying to marry those two up. Keep that kind of interconnectedness and lend a little bit of structure to the veteran space, while at the same time, being able to actually implement and research programs.
Gotcha. How long has it been going?
15 plus years.
Okay.
Yeah. And, we just had it's always been in Raleigh. Just recently, we've kind of made a commitment to move it around the state. We were in High Point, North Carolina, absolutely beautiful venue in High Point called Cogden Yards. It was one of the best meetings that we've had, that we're able to get, a lot of questions and a lot of interaction. It's not just the same people in the room. We're kind of expanding that reach and making people understand that, hey, this organization is here to do those, to perform those essential backbone functions, to steal a collective impact term. So, establishing a shared measurement, making sure that programs align with each other and don't necessarily step on each other, and provide a communication and a conduit to state government and to policymakers, which, in a lot of other states, and there was one far north of us that I won't call out, but I actually got a call from someone that works for State Veterans Affairs and said, hey, I've heard about this thing that you guys do. Can you tell me more about it? How do we do it here? And so, really so much of that is just rooted in the collective impact model and trying to not be redundant with our services.
Gotcha. One of the questions that I had for you is, what are you seeing for our listeners who might not intersect every day with military personnel? What are you seeing? What are the trends? What are some of maybe the concerns that you're hearing from our military personnel, from our veterans, that you can share?
Yeah. So, and that's probably one of the most important things. I'm glad you asked that I want to talk about today. And that is that for a lot of addiction professionals, for a lot of healthcare professionals, you see more veterans than you realize. We worked with DHHS for a few years trying to get what we're calling the Ask the Question campaign off the ground. And the question being, have you or a loved one ever served in the armed forces? And being able to ask that at intake or when a provider change, or if you're reviewing records, is hugely important, because as a clinician or a provider, it can make your job a lot easier. This is, I'll steal kind of a unfortunately familiar story that I've had a number of my friends and colleagues have all experienced, and that is, back in my day, we'll say, when I was in the Army, I got out in 2005, went back as a contractor for a while, but opioid pain medication was prescribed somewhat freely, and it was somewhat limited. Again, this is not a treatise on the Department of Defense. This is just anecdotally what I've experienced, is that it was not tightly regulated, and so introducing a lot of young soldiers, young airmen, Marines, sailors to these pain medications, sometimes unnecessarily, really it enhances their opportunities to become addicted, or to discover that, hey, I enjoy that kind of thing. And so often what happens is that results in maybe an other than honorable discharge, or maybe after discharge, say, you get through your term of service, you get out and are still looking for that. So many of those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, they turn to other opioids that are available in the street, like heroin. And so understanding as a clinician that you go, hey, have you or a loved one ever served? Oh, you have. Well, maybe that addiction started in the military or was exacerbated by your service. And as such, there are probably a lot more resources available to you, whether it be through the VA, in the community, through the state. So all of those hiccups that you might see working with someone with an addiction, it helps to act on those upstream and downstream. And so you ask that question, they say yes, and you say, okay, well, let me get you connected to your nearest veteran service officer, right? They are a free service. They work for the state or the county and do a phenomenal job of getting veterans connected to benefits through the VA. And most veterans are not even aware of the benefits that they're entitled to. And so there becomes an added safety net, right? They have access to supportive housing, or access to health care, or a little bit extra money coming in. And so, that as an upstream intervention can really stave off some of those big problems. And not to say that, it would eliminate relapse, because, we think of that as part of as part of the recovery process.
Yeah.
But
I think too, oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was just going to say, I think too, the other piece is like that, therapeutic relationship is a safe place to explore. Like, I think a lot of veterans struggle accepting those benefits. And they say, oh, well, like a veteran who's homeless probably needs that, or a veteran who is worse off than me probably needs that. So I'm not going to go like milk the VA for all it's worth, because I have a home and I have a loving family, all these things. Like, and the therapist can step in and say, actually, like, that's not a great frame of reference to look at this through. Like, you earned those benefits and they are for you. And actually, you probably really do need them. And I think that probably could also help, like asking that question can open up that conversation. They might not go sign up for benefits that day, but that conversation at least is open. And hopefully at some point they will sign up for those benefits, Yeah.
And there are so many, especially here in North Carolina. I don't know if it's more of a national audience or here in our state, but there are unbelievable resources here in North Carolina. So we have a program called NC Serves that I've been connected with for a number of years, and it's basically a one-to-one navigator that will handhold a veteran all around the services to which that they need and to which they're eligible and entitled. And not only that, but make the warm handoffs, right? Make sure that they're actually getting there. And all of that is through a shared platform that's run by a company called Unite Us. And I mean, they're able to make those immediate referrals, and all we have to do is get those veterans or those family members in the door. And that's a figurative in the door, because they just do the online, or give us a call. Just visit nccare360.org/NCServes, and the intake form is right there. Um, and it really, I mean, it can be the difference in someone who is permanently homeless, or someone that we lose to suicide or lose to SUD, and somebody that makes a recovery and becomes a great story, and somebody that we can really rely on in the community.
David, we have a few minutes left, and one of the things I think would be really helpful to all our listeners is, how does the program help military families, or does it, or can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, active duty military families, veteran families, even children of veterans, we call it a sea of goodwill, right? And right now, nationally, there are more dollars and more people and more organizations, more programs than at any point in our history that are geared towards those who serve and the people around them. And so it's phenomenal. But again, it's so hard to swim this, sea of goodwill if you don't know where you're going. And so, using some of those resources like the NC for Vets resource guide, NC for the number 4 vets.org, or NC Serves, they're able to kind of track, okay, you are a spouse or a former spouse or a Gold Star family member. So now we know and understand both the federal, state, and community programs that you may be eligible for. And so, those folks, those care coordinators do a phenomenal job. And that's something that we want to communicate to families, and also to really to female veterans. We were talking earlier about the issues with having veterans not self-identify. We have a huge problem with female veterans not standing up to say, hey, yes, I served. I wore the uniform. I served honorably, or, had XYZ experience. Because so often we see them say, and it absolutely kills me, hey, I parked at the grocery store in the veteran parking, and somebody said, hey, that's only for veterans, right? That's terrifying. That's what an awful thing to say to someone, because the military is an extremely diverse and dramatically inclusive environment, and so you don't know that, hey, just because someone may be a certain gender, a certain ethnic group, or body composition, stuff like that, you really need to honor the fact that there's a good chance that they did serve. Mm-hmm. And so, sorry to get on my soapbox, but that's one of my big issues personally of getting women veterans to really participate in these services, so that way we can collect the data. Mm-hmm. That way we can go back to the policymakers and say, hey, we have had an influx of female veterans, and they have a unique set of needs, and we need to put money towards this from a policy standpoint.
Yeah, it's so hard. Like, data drives the funding. Mm-hmm. And if you can't get the data, you can't get the funding. And I mean, it's frustrating, because even when the need is there, you have to be able to prove it. And so I think it's a good point, too, because when you talk about the ask the question, right? Like, it's not just asking the men in your life. We're both very proud daughters of veterans. Mm-hmm. And I didn't fight, I didn't serve, right? But that impacts my story. It's mm-hmm. impacted Sarah's story. Yep. Her father's buried in a military cemetery, and
probably buried
that means
Abraham
something,
Lincoln.
And so it does. It just has a profound impact, I think, on the life of the person who has served, but also on their families.
Well, I think it is helpful, David, as you say that, because there are military families. There are, like you said, all genders, race, shapes, sizes that have served for this country and served on our behalf. And so what you're doing at Governor's Institute we're really appreciative of. We're really appreciative to be able to shine a light on it today. Hope you'll be able to come back and share some more of those stories. For any of our listeners, you've mentioned a few different websites, which are great. But is there any final message you want them to take away, or if they haven't gotten involved and they want to find out more, where should they go today?
Yeah, so ton of resources. A great place to start is NC4 Vets, and there is a search tool in there. You can enter your county in North Carolina, and it can get you connected to your county veteran service officer, a state veteran service office. But a really talented and hardworking person will be on the other end of the telephone. That's ready to explore what benefits you may be connected or eligible for. Apart from that, again, NC Serves. It's the absolute every social determinant of health. Every domain that you can think of, there is a provider in NC Serves that can treat that or that can provide that service. And so, those are probably the two biggest.
Awesome.
In terms of final thoughts, what I'd like to leave you with is really just to kind of steal and build on a favorite Carl Rogers quote, is that we have to find personal in the universal and universal in the personal. And really, understand that we think that we're not a clinician that serves veterans, right? We don't categorize ourselves that way or title ourselves that way. However, we probably have veteran clients, and so like it or not, understand it or not, veterans, all of these kind of specific population demographics, you're connected to all of those. And so all of those personal problems may have some universal solutions or, vice versa. And so in the same way that we kind of treat the whole person and, deal with whole health, we have to kind of be cognizant of everything that our clients have experienced.
I think that's
Awesome.
that is a great place to finish. We appreciate it, David.
Yes, and we'll put all those resources in the podcast notes. So if for some reason I didn't catch some of them, I'm going to send you all of that and have you just double check that I have the right websites and all of that. But thank you so much for being here, for indulging us as our first guest.
Yes.
And just for sharing. We really appreciate the work y'all do at the Governor's Institute and appreciate being able to partner with y'all. So if there's anything we can do, to support, please reach out.
Yep. And we'll be back in touch. I'm sure we'll have you back.
I can't wait. I will check my email daily.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Thanks, David.
This has been fantastic. Thank you both, so much. It's been amazing to meet you. I know that the work that APNC does is, second to none. And, I'm just really glad that we can have this partnership.
We are too.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will be talking soon.